All right, guys. Got another great stream with a great guest. I really think you're going to enjoy. For once, Auron, you're on the Jay Burden Show. How you doing, man?
My lines, you can just take them all. You can take the memes, you can take the lines. I invite you onto my show, and this is what no, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Look, as someone who's made a middling online career out of stealing ideas from people who are smarter than he is, I don't really know what you should expect, Auron. This is basically what the Jay Burden Show exists to do, to launder ideas from from more established people. But in all seriousness, man, very glad to have you on. And we're here to discuss I don't know, we could say just an absolute freak out of epic proportions. So I think it's probably best to cover the inciting incident. How would you introduce what's been going on for the past couple days?
So I'd like to start by saying this, and I know we're about to do a lot of talking about people we disagree with, um, but I have to say that after the death of Charlie Kirk, this being the central thing that conservatives decided to spend their time on is one of the most disgusting things I have ever seen in my life. I have plenty of opinions on our relationship with Israel. I'm not shy about that. I've never hidden that fact. I've gotten plenty of pushback about it. But it did not occur to me in the slightest, even for a moment, after watching Charlie Kirk die, that now was the time, that this was the moment, that I needed to advance those opinions and secure my dominance over others inside the movement with those. Like, that is just so insane. And I say this on both sides because I want to be clear. I was just as angry at people who were running around going, Israel shot Charlie Kirk and it's a 9-point conspiracy. Like, I was denouncing every one of these idiots immediately after they started talking like this. So this is not just I'm angry at the other side for politicizing. Like, no, I was talking to these idiots who might agree with some point I make about, Israel should not receive the amount of funding it does from the United States, and immediately decided to go with, and that's why they planned the murder of Charlie Kirk. Like, this was just as stupid when they were doing it. But it's become clear that this is going to be the issue, apparently, that people need to fight about. And Charlie Kirk was just a catalyst. He was just a reason for people to completely unspool over something like this. And it's some of the most disgusting behavior I have ever seen, and I am ashamed of many people over the way they have conducted themselves over this. That said, the fact that this has broken now is not a mistake, right? Like, this tension has been building for a long time inside the movement, especially with younger conservatives. And this is something I'm sure we'll get into, but this is almost entirely a generational battle. If you look at what's happening, frankly, Charlie Kirk was the last bulwark for Israel when it came to TPUSA aged conservatives, right? Like, if you look at pretty much everyone who loved Charlie of that age, they kind of still disagreed with him to some extent on Israel, right? And you can see that's kind of why Charlie Kirk was shifting a little bit on this issue. Again, not because he was unprincipled or he didn't love Israel or he was falling away, he was about to renounce Israel. Like, no, he obviously still loved Israel and felt like it had biblical significance, even as a modern nation state. But he was recognizing that, like, as an American first representative, you can love a country without sending them $4 billion a year, without sending troops to fight for them, without committing your strategic, allowance, your diplomatic power to a country that frankly doesn't do a whole lot for you. And so he could recognize he held, like a rational human being, he could adjust some of the foreign policy things that he was applying to Israel while still feeling all the religious and emotional attachment he had to that country. And rather than let that just be enough, rather than let Charlie be like this kind of crossroads of kind of an opinion about this issue that was being revised while also not letting in the darkest elements that tend to sit on the anti-Israel side, rather than let him be that rallying point, people insisted that we had to pivot to attacking everyone on this, right? Like, and so, yes, Tucker Carlson had Nick Fuentes on his show. Frankly, I disagree with Tucker approaching Fuentes the way that he did. I don't think that it's off beyond the pale for Tucker to have Fuentes on the show. But I think he should have asked some tougher questions. And frankly, a lot of questions had nothing to do with Israel. But this is the problem. Everything has to be about Israel. So you could have hit Fuentes on things like the fact that he seems to let sex pests hang around his movement, that he's betrayed pretty much everyone who has been a friend to him, that he has attacked grieving widows and these kind of things that are just beyond the pale. You could have gone after all that stuff. But instead, it all had to be about Israel. Because that's, let's be honest, that's very clearly the actual issue here. And it's just been insane to watch. Sorry, I know I ranted forever there, but.
Oh, not at all. Look, it's why you're here. I think that, to me, it's easy to look at this as a coordinated or as a singular incident, whereas really it is sort of the culmination of a long-running, in my mind, coordinated trend.
Yes.
You may remember several weeks ago the leak of a Young Republicans group chat. Young people behind the scenes saying edgy things together, sort of laughing and joking, violating the sort of, shall we say, social conservative norms in the way they speak, joking about edgy things regarding, race and religion and prominent 20th century events. And that story was broken. And we see many of these same characters saying again and again and again, look, we told you. We told you that Tucker Carlson made your kids Nazis. This is the woke right. We have to root this out, root and branch. Incidentally, look, there was, precedent events before, right? The figures like old, Jim Lindsay, has been involved in, this kind of talking point around the woke right. But this sort of generational divide seems to be sort of a rehash of something we've seen again and again and again in the conservative movement, which is a desire to eat your own, a desire to push out your best, brightest, and by some standards, most radical. It was Pat Buchanan's birthday yesterday, I believe. And it's funny because that sort of got brought into this whole discussion. You have people saying, how dare you try to rehabilitate Pat Buchanan? He's exactly what's wrong with America. We need to push his ideas out. And again, each one of these incidents has become sort of a battle in this war, a battle for the future of the American right wing. Is this another instantiation of, what the neocons successfully did with characters like Dinesh D'Souza, who we will reference again later, pushing out many of our heroes, guys like Dr. Gottfried, Sam Francis, many others. And look, as you said with Charlie Kirk, this is a time where that sort of nonsense should not be tolerated. We're less than 2 months out from a relatively moderate conservative being killed for being a quote unquote Nazi, a fascist. And to see these people nominally on the American right pull out that exact same rhetoric to attack us and our friends, it's clear what they're doing. They know what they are advocating for. They understand that that is a term that you use to signal that you are an outlaw. You are outside the pale, and violence is acceptable. This is a point that you made in a tweet we may read later, basically saying, like, it's clear that these people are calling indirectly for the murder of conservatives they don't like, either literally in the case of Kirk or in a social or economic sense. These people ought to be canceled. And it's particularly irritating when you hear this rhetoric from the classical liberals, the people who come after you. I was going to say you and I, but let's be honest, you, Auron, for reading figures like Machiavelli, for saying, oh, you adopt the Schmittian friend-enemy distinction. How dare you? You're a completely amoral actor. And they will say that out of one side of their mouth, and then out of the other say, it's the duty of conservatives, of our movement, to police anti-Semitism, to police racism. And again, what's especially frustrating is that we have so recently seen the consequences of losing. We have seen what it costs to be designated a fascist. We have seen what happens to people like that. And to take that and immediately turn around and decide to do exactly the thing that kept the conservative movement just completely irrelevant and ineffectual for my entire life, for your entire life. These people are determined losers. So I'm going to pivot to some tweets, not just because it is kind of fun to make fun of people I don't like on the internet, although it is certainly that, but because I think these are sort of exemplary to the issues we're discussing. All right, so this is a two-parter, right? First, we have Dinesh D'Souza, who is someone I strongly dislike. He has a long history of cancel culture. So for context, he is responding to alleged racist abuse towards Vivek, who you may remember from the great H1B drama of roughly a year ago. So basically, he is saying, look at all the horrible racism. This is the shit show that Heritage and Tucker have brought upon us. If this continues, I would not be surprised to see mass desertions of Blacks, Latinos, and other minorities from the GOP. Unreal. Several things there. One, it bears mentioning that Heritage, much to their credit, stood by Tucker. They basically said, yeah, he can talk to whoever he wants. He's not we're not his mom. Additionally, you see this bizarre idea that we need to push harder for effectively woke values around, racial representation. You see, they literally have the exact same values, exact same priorities as the Democrats. And then lastly, this is a quote tweet, which Dinesh D'Souza liked enough that he reposted from Megan McArdle. The alt-right racists are too numerous and absolute, but not numerous enough, thank God, to make them election critical. And the right should expel them with great vigor, rather than the Democrats did, making a small but noisy fraction a critical part of their base. Anyway, so sorry, Auron, that's another big rant from me. I think this kind of flurry of social media messages is sort of exemplary, both because we've seen D'Souza do this before, but also because, to give Heritage credit, they stuck by Tucker, right? They didn't engage in this sort of ankle-biting behavior. But I'll throw it to you, man.
So a couple things just off the rip. First, I've been on Dinesh D'Souza's show many times at this point. We've been relatively cordial with each other, despite having some disagreements. And he seems to have largely valued my opinion, having me on his show. I even had a extended debate with him on another gentleman's YouTube channel. And during that debate, we were both very measured and complimentary to each other. We both said about how much we thought that debate was productive compared to others because of our ability to kind of put emotional stuff aside and make this about discussing an issue that we disagreed about. And this is, I am obviously someone who most people know because I'm good at Twitter, right? And so, I understand, unfortunately, the pitfalls of this platform, right? Which is, if you are not capable of separating people from that you have met or talked to or interacted with from random people you've never met who are talking about stuff that's totally unconnected to those people, then you will quickly fly down all kinds of insane rabbit holes. So somewhere and Anon said something Dinesh didn't like. And now that means Tucker Carlson said that thing that Dinesh didn't like. It doesn't matter if Tucker Carlson never said anything that, or I never said anything like that. None of that matters now, because we're all the worst personification of whatever a random person said online, right? That is how you do this. And of course, this is the most leftist tactic in the world, right? This is just guilt by association. Somewhere someone said something that I don't like, and so therefore I can apply it to other people I don't like, and they're all the same people instantaneously. That said, as you pointed out, everything that Dinesh is pushing back against in that response, is just the most leftist frame imaginable. What if we lose our really valuable Black supporters in the MAGA movement? The brothers be flippin', as my friend Steve Dace always says. He always makes that joke. This is the year. This is the year that the Black American male vote is going to just flip for the United States, or flip for the Republicans, and really. And then this is the most sinister part of that framing, right? The implication is there, and that is what makes a position viable, right? You only have moral authority if you have a collection of ethnic minorities rubber stamping what you believe, right? And this is particularly ironic for the people who argue against identity politics and argue it's all about principle. Well, actually, it's not about principle at all. It turns out a principle is bad if people with the wrong skin color disagree with it, and a principle is good if enough people with the right skin color disagree with it, and the right skin color is never white. And so every other minority and their opinions matters the most. Now, I am very sure that there are people saying some very inappropriate and very mean things to Vivek Ramaswamy on the internet. I'm familiar because I've had Israeli supporters talking about how they wish the Israeli government would kill me this week. But I'm not gonna
check your pager, Auron.
Right. But I'm not gonna attribute that to Dinesh D'Souza, right? Like, Dinesh did not say, "I hope the Israeli government is going to blow you up." And I'm not going to attribute that to him. I'm not going to say that's his belief system. I'm not going to say that's how he feels about every person who disagrees with him on Israel. I'm not going to say that about Dinesh D'Souza because he didn't say that. But unfortunately, it seems like Dinesh and many of the people currently on just complete Israeli derangement syndrome, complete spin out over this, are doing exactly that. They're just mining the worst possible comments after random people while we watch mainstream neocons talking about how everyone who disagrees with them is Hitler. And as you pointed out, the whole exercise we just literally went through was obvious that calls about fascism and Hitler are open calls for violence. This is what Antifa uses right before it murders somebody. This is what they etch onto their bullets. Hey, catch, fascist, right? Like, this is what we hear. And yet this is exactly what these people are doing now. And so I don't see why there should be any difference between what they are saying, what the left is saying, and what these people are saying. They are very clearly calling for this. And by the way, we had the cultural and political momentum to make this something that was prohibited, right? Like, I wrote several articles after the killing of Charlie Kirk about how we needed to make calling someone a Nazi as culturally unacceptable as calling for the lynching of some black man on a show, right? Like, these should have the same level of stigma attached to them personally. And guess what? Then half of the American right decided they would join the left in calling right-wingers fascists, which means they are calling for their death. And I'm not going to pretend anything different. I'm just not.
Well, and to this point, it's doubly damning because you see both that they're completely and totally unserious. They are completely and totally owned by their opposition. And also, nothing has been learned. Both obviously in the case of Charlie Kirk, but again, in this case, or in this tweet I pulled up from Eric Stockelbeck. Sorry, I'm not familiar with these sort of names. But he compares Tucker. He basically says, like, oh, he would be talking to David Duke, right? And not only is that hilarious, just as a comedically out of date reference. Like again, like not only are we thought we'd gotten past comparing someone to Trump to Hitler, right? The conservative movement loves to laugh at liberals for their their out of date references or comparing everything to Harry Potter. But these same people, will go back to the same tired cultural tropes when it is, something within the house, right? Within their own team, so to speak. They will mirror the exact same behaviors that they loved to mock the left for 10 years now, right? This is so clearly not a principled movement, right? It is simply just a reaction of, I don't like you, go away. I won't read this tweet. It's incredibly long and incredibly embarrassing. But there are others, right? We have Randy Fine, again, going back to the same old well, calling Tucker the most dangerous anti-Semite in America and bringing about the modern Hitler youth. I want to go back to that because I do think there is at least some, and when I say coordination, I don't think there's some kind of smoky boardroom, but there has been a long-running line of reasoning trying to connect Tucker to this, to the poisoning of the youth, going back to that sort of generational divide we spoke about earlier. But this is, I think, perhaps the most interesting part about this. So this is a response to Max Abrams, who has been losing his mind, genuinely just embarrassing himself. But this is sort of an interesting argument because we're starting to see sort of jockeying for the successor to the MAGA movement, right? It is effectively, is it going to go to JD Vance, as Trump seems to desire, or is it going to be absorbed back into the Borg, so to speak? Is it going to go back to Con Inc.? So I'll read this out. Tucker Carlson statements offer clear proof that JD Vance, Matt Gaetz, and MTG share the same foreign policy positions, basically drawing connections between the two of those, effectively saying, all of these are poisoned. We can't let the conservative movement fall to these people. So I'm curious, how do you think that this sort of attack lines up with sort of a fight for the future of the MAGA base?
Yeah, Sean Davis made a similar post in, but unveiling this rather than supporting it the way that this person is. But he said, look, all of this is a bunch of people who are fighting a proxy war for control of the conservative movement. The neocons are on the outs. They know it. A new generation is rolling in, and they have to get rid of Vance. Vance is the new right successor, and they know that if they don't unseat him, then they might really lose power. Like right now, it's shaky. They've got some, they got a few fingers in the pie when it comes to the Trump administration. They can still control most of the legacy institutions, but they're panicking, and they're panicking for actually a really good reason. Like when you have TPUSA, and let's be really clear, again, Charlie Kirk loved Israel. Okay, there's no reason to pretend any other way. But when you have TPUSA after this saying, look, we're not going to cancel people, we're not going to cancel Tucker, we're not going to cancel other people who oppose Israel, we're going to support him. And pushing back, I've seen many TPUSA members, both top leadership and at the bottom, all saying this is unhinged. The neocons are attacking us and trying to destroy us. When you have the Heritage Foundation, Jay Burden, if I told you 10 years ago, the Heritage Foundation would be under attack from the conservative establishment, would that even make sense as a sentence? Would that even compute to you?
None of the relations anywhere, right? The idea that there would be a divide between heritage and conservative establishment, the idea that being associated with Tucker Carlson would be so controversial that someone would need to, quote unquote, denounce it. I mean, every one of those, it's absurd, right? From that perspective.
Yeah, I mean, remember when 10 minutes ago, when the Claremont Institute was the most crazy and dangerous thing on the right? And by the way, basically it's built on like following the philosophy of two Jewish guys. But like that was the most dangerous and anti-Semitic possible, organization inside the right. And now the Heritage Foundation, like these people are losing. They're losing on every front. They're losing the generational battle. They're losing donors. They're losing public opinion. They're losing institutional support. They own the institution. That was all they had left, and they've completely lost it. They know where they're at, and that's why they are losing their mind, right? Like that's why they're panicking. And this is why they're willing to go all out on this. And of course, you're right to point out this was not some single incident, right? Like they were attacking Tucker Carlson about reading the Bible at Charlie Kirk's funeral, right? Like that was anti-Semitic. So there's literally nothing you can do. They're just going to lie about you because they want control of the movement. And again, this is highlighted even more. I don't even know if you saw this because he deleted it immediately after JD Vance responded. But John Podhoretz put out this tweet about how Sean Davis at the Federalist is like this Hitler-obsessed guy reading the Elder Protocols of Zion and planning the next Holocaust. Sean Davis, the head of the Federalist. Like, again, this is where we're at. Any perceived loyalty to Vance, any questioning about nonstop wars, any questioning about the relationship with Israel is tantamount to Nazism for these people. And it is because they have adopted the exact left-wing strategy. You just label someone an anti-Semite instead of labeling them a racist, and then you can treat them however you want. You can be as evil as you want to them. You can lie about them. You can deceive people about them. You can call for their death. It doesn't matter because Nazis are the most evil thing in the world. And we all know you can punch a Nazi. You can do whatever you want to a Nazi. And in this way, the conservative establishment and the left is entirely in lockstep. And they are going to facilitate the same thing. One of these people is going to push someone to shoot Tucker Carlson or someone like him. Like that's the plan. I want to make it very clear. No hesitation on this. That is the plan. These people are so bloodthirsty and interested in control, they will use the exact same tactic that got Charlie Kirk murdered, because they believe the same thing these people do. They think that anyone who disagrees with them is below contempt and should simply be banished from the movement or killed.
Well, and it's especially frustrating because you see what these people's true goal is. Their goal is not to have a successful right wing or conservative movement. It is for them to be in control of their own little sandbox, right? They would rather, be the kings of the sandbox than ever actually, win or sort of serve as some sort of like genuine, I guess, bid for control of America. Because over and over and over again, they have thrown away something interesting, something that could have produced a win for the sake of a better spot, relatively cozying up to the regime, cozying up to the Beltway. They would much rather be, invited to all the same parties, even if they have to, stab someone in the back, because that's where they consider their goal to be. Their goal is not to win. Their goal is not to be a real political party. Their goal is to be generally well respected and to basically collect attacks from the hinterland, right? To collect the attacks from flyover America. That's what they do. They don't actually win. They don't actually want to, be a real political force. And it's so clear that all of their objections to cancel culture, all of their objections to, the way that the left framed things were not at all based on principle. They were not at all based on some sort of inviolable standard of values. It is simply, as it always has been, friend and enemy. For my friends, everything. For my enemies, the law. And to be attacked on that basis for the last year and a half, that idea is fundamentally illegitimate. And to see them less than 2 weeks after one of the most dramatic assassinations in American history, to completely 180 degrees turn around. It's like, okay, yeah, sure. It's what I expected, but I maybe expected a little more shame. Maybe that was too much to expect from these people, that at least have the decency to hide it a little more. And to your point, I think that the shrill moralism we're seeing, which is genuinely embarrassing. Like, just as a man, I wouldn't talk like that about almost anything, let alone this, which, I mean, I'm not the biggest Fuentes fan. I feel like I'm just not in his demographic at all. I'm not Mexican. I'm not Catholic. I'm married. I don't have a lot to gain from him, but
Don't enjoy boys wearing cat ears.
it's not my thing. But nonetheless, I listened to that interview and I didn't think it's kind of a nothing burger. Like, sure, there were questions unanswered, but it does not correlate to a freak out of this order. It's embarrassing, genuinely embarrassing. And so I see these people as sort of thrashing around, desperately trying to, regain the, unchallenged moral cultural superiority they had just a few years ago. And to be honest, I have no sympathy for these people because, let's be honest, during their time in power, they were wrong about everything. In a foreign policy sense, they were wrong about everything. On the domestic stage, is there any way in which America is more conservative as a nation, any way in which it is better off socially or culturally or demographically than it was before these people were in charge? So the idea that they have some sort of special understanding of how we really have to win elections, that they can be the ones who set us back when their values were hegemonic, conservatives were eternally losing, and only by departing them through Donald Trump did the conservative movement in America start to see even the hint of a win. It's absurd. These people have no real claim other than this kind of like limp-wristed moral panic.
Yeah, I mean, as you point out, the vast majority of these people were never Trumpers. Like they were they were just the ones that weren't stupid enough to do the Bill Kristol "I'm voting for Mom Donnie" routine, right? Like they're all people who signed their name to being anti-Trump or were pushing DeSantis the minute they thought they could get past Trump. They're the people they're the same people who said were worried that the Republican Party would become the cult of personality of Donald Trump and made all the warnings. Right now, both of us have had our problems with Donald Trump over the years, right? Like neither of us are going to sit here and pretend that Donald Trump is like a messiah figure, or untouchable leader, beyond any kind of any level of criticism. But look, I've had a consistent position on Donald Trump the entire time, which is like, while I don't think he is the greatest leader of all time or flawless, he is clearly better than the alternative. He has had my support in all of the elections that he has been a part of. And it's very clear that this is just terrifying to the conservative movement, and they figured out a way to kind of fold MAGA in like the Tea Party, right? Like just kind of, oh well, we'll adopt some of its leaders, we'll use some of its language, but ultimately we can just kind of steer it back, right? You've noticed that all these people who were neocons are claiming that they're no longer neocons while having changed literally not a single position on foreign policy. Like they might say something that, well, maybe we should have gone to the Iraq war. Maybe that was a mistake. But I'm ready to go to war with literally everyone else right now, right? Like it is just not impacted their policy at all. And so it's very clear that just the neocon establishment went nowhere. It was in charge of the party before Trump. It did nothing. It achieved nothing. These people were always angry at Trump for showing up on the scene and blowing up the idea that we can just go in and invade every country in the world. By the way, Trump not doing so great on that, by the way. But on top of that, they felt like they had kind of wrangled this whole thing and brought it under the control. And it turns out, like, actually, no, there are a larger amount of people who took Trump seriously, who actually believed in what he was pushing, who really actually did want to advance this idea of America first. And that is just unacceptable. It's entirely unacceptable. And so now Trump has won a bunch of victories. And as you say, the neocons couldn't do any of this stuff, right? Like overturning Roe v. Wade, presiding over the end of affirmative action in colleges, just like massive generational wins, not even small ball stuff. He didn't get a tax cut, though he did get a tax cut. But I mean, we're talking about, completely, we're now looking at the Voting Rights Act, Jay Burden, the Voting Rights Act. These are real, solid.
Well, I mean, to that point, Trump turned EBT off. Right. That's crazy. Like right. They've been talking about that my entire life. So like
Department of Education, USAID, right? Just boom, 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 knocking this stuff out left and right. And don't get me wrong, I care deeply about the trans stuff. I think everyone knows that. I've got famous memes about it. But he went well beyond what was popular in the conservative coalition. He didn't just win getting men out of women's bathrooms or trans out of the military or something. He is winning on every one of these fronts. And the approach from neocons has been like, oh, no, we did that. Those are our victories. Even though they all occurred under the Trump administration, they fought tooth and nail to get out of this. And now they want to claim the mantle of MAGA because it's been the most successful conservative movement in my life, completely devoid of their influence. And we're just not going to let them have it. That's it. Like, that's the end of the story. They can't have it. They can pry it from our cold, dead fingers, which it seems like for some of them, that is actually the intention.
Yeah, it seems like they're okay with the terms of that you've offered. But again, what we have here is, in some cases, literally, in some cases, ideologically, we have interlopers, people who were part of something else until very, very recently. Either they were Trotskyists or the children of Trotskyists. They may have, a hyphenated American status. They have, passports to other countries. And they come here, again, and let's just say in an ideological context, and they say, well, you don't understand what your values truly are. I am the arbiter of what it is to be a conservative, what it is to be an American, what it is to be MAGA, and you need to listen to me. And one, I find this just to be a moral affront. It does drive me crazy, and if I'm not careful, I can say things that are perhaps inadvisable, so I'll calm down on that front. But so clearly, the sense of entitlement is not getting them anywhere. This sort of idea that, well, the right wing is the designated loser zone, and by being the most recent liberal arrival, I get to be in charge of this. The left left me. Let me be in charge. I get to tell you what it is to be an American. I get to tell you about the blessings of liberty. I get to tell you how to view your own values. It's incredibly insulting. And so, look, like the idea that we have to continually go through this cycle of accepting the embarrassed liberal elites of yesteryear. It's simply not the case. There's nothing that says you have to do that. But nonetheless, those former progressive, former liberals, former Trotskyists are incredibly invested in making sure that you think that is how you must act, because that's the only thing that allows them to, have their relative position of power. So I'm curious, Auron, do you think that maybe this is a time where we can actually stop the neocon cycle, as it were, just adopting the values and elites of our enemies from a previous decade?
So here's the best news of after at all this, right? These people have already lost. They've already lost. Like and it's so obvious. This is the thrashing of a dying animal, and a thrashing dying animal is the most dangerous thing in the world, but it's dying nonetheless, right? Like these people know on some deep level that once key institutions like TPUSA and Heritage start revolting against them, they're toast. They're done. They were already losing the generational battle because, again, they were relying on generations of people that, one, firmly believed in a dispensationalist understanding of Christianity and therefore felt a literally religious commitment to the state of Israel as it stands as a modern political entity. Two, they were relying on basically the talk radio dynamic, right? Where we talk about problems and we talk about the media, but they're not things that we can do anything about, right? Like they're just kind of eternal enemies that always have an advantage over us. And we talk about how unfair they are and how ridiculous it is that they're in control of things, but we have zero plan about like how to do anything about that fact, right? Like we're not going to create some alternative. We're not going to use the rules to force the opposing team to stop violating the whole, like none of it, right? And so both of those things are just a complete failure to the younger generation. If you talk to anyone under 40 who is not literally paid to believe what they believe, they're opposed to all of this stuff. You and I both know that. We're talking to far more young conservatives or right wingers than any of these people. And by the way, they know that too. Again, that's why Charlie Kirk is having those discussions behind closed doors, right? That's why he's getting pressured by pro-Zionist donors and they're dropping him over this issue, because Charlie knew, because he was plugged into what was happening, that he could not literally just ban the entire cohort of conservatives under 40, because he knows that's where they're going. He knows he's talking to these people, right? And we know that too. And so it's one of those things where, like, yeah, I think we really can stop this. I don't think you're going to see every conservative establishment or the members of Congress will suddenly adopt this position, though more of them are. But it's very clear that these people have lost the generational battle and now even the institutional battle. And I think at that point, it's really just a matter of when, not if.
Well, and to that point, right? Why would we take winning advice from these people? They're eternal losers. Genuinely. Like, okay, like you would ask this at a job interview, if you're applying for a job, like, well, tell us about your track record. And if your track record was an unbroken string of L's, just, 0 and 100, just over and over and over again, getting humiliatingly defeated, why would anyone hire you? Why would anyone listen to you? And so when you see a moment where the right wing in America is connecting with a vibrant youth, with young guys who are capable, who are talented, who are pushing in the right direction, this is a godsend, right? The conservative movement has been stuck with, relatively speaking, poorer human resources, fewer people, access to less, and you've got this godsend, this sort of care package of highly motivated young men. And your response is, yeah, no, we can't have them around. You got to get rid of them. Get rid of the Hitler youth, quote unquote. Again, these people are not a real political party. They're not a real political tendency. They're a losers club. To your point about talking to young conservatives, I almost want to say young right wingers. I don't know if there are very many young conservatives, right, maybe myself included. The radicalism is insane. And so the idea that, well, if we just cut that off from the legacy conservative movement, they will go away is clearly not true, because they tried that 10 years ago with the original alt-right. And they were able to get guys fired to ruin their lives. But did that tendency go away? No, it changed. That is, from a certain perspective, at least a large part of the genetic makeup of the current internet right, which is much bigger than the alt-right ever was. Right? It has grown much larger. It's become more influential. And the idea that they can simply bury their head in the sand, wish for it to all go away, call them Nazis, get them fired, and we can go back to what? Go back to the Bush presidency? Before that? Like, what is the game plan here? And the answer is there's really no game plan other than do exactly what I want. Right? That is that is what they're saying. And really, it's incredibly apparent that there is really there's no argument more than that. The specifics change, the justification changes, but it's all post hoc rationalization. It is all whatever I can say, whatever I can spin together to make you do what I want, to give up what you have and let me be in control again. And I have genuinely no sympathy for these people. And the idea that the only way you can oppose these neocons is by being some kind of radical lunatic, escape from a padded room. It's so clearly not true. Like, is Heritage a radical institution? I like Tucker, but is Tucker some sort of lunatic, some crazy guy on the street corner? He's one of the top 10 biggest podcasts in America. By definition, it is popular and normal to think what Tucker thinks. Clearly. Like, I look, like, I'm not the biggest democracy fan, but allegedly many of these people are. And so if that's something we are to value, if it is popular, shouldn't it be good? Again, like anything, their values are only convenient to them in so much as they enable them to win. And by win, I mean gain control of their little fiefdom. But I'll throw it back to you, Auron.
Yeah. We're all fans of elite theory here. So none of us are under the illusion that elites are overly responsive to public opinion. They don't respond to public opinion. They shape public opinion. And the conservative elite have been just as good at that as the leftist elite, believe it or not. A lot of people think, oh, well, the left, they had, this media capture and the right's been fighting against it. No. That media capture is symbiotic, right? Like, the large chunk of the right has been tasked with basically ruling the plebs, right? They're the designated, king of the plebs, the satrapy that kicks back up to the actual emperor, right? And so their job was never to actually agree with the values of the right, conservatives, red America. It was to shoehorn those people into an ideology that would allow the ruling class to continue to do what it's doing. And a lot of these guys would not announce their role openly in that project, but they all understand where their authority comes from, right? They have authority because they're palatable to the left. They can be digested by the left. They can live inside the frame of the left, even if they're the bad guy, even as the boogeyman, even as the king of the dumb bumpkins, right? Like, they're ultimately still creatures who derive all of their authority and standing from the left. And so they are terrified of watching the institutions come apart, because the very same institutions that ensconce the left in a media monopoly also ensconce them in a similar monopoly on the right. And that is broken down, right? And this is why you can see them going after someone like Fuentes with so much passion, right? Because Fuentes is very obviously a shock jock. He says, I love Hitler, I love Stalin, I hate women, Jews, whatever it is that will get someone to yell at you. A lot of it's ideologically incoherent. It doesn't matter, right? As long as it gets a rise, that's all that matters. And when you have somebody like that, the worst thing you can do is make them Voldemort, right? Is to make them unspeakable. Because then it takes something that should be a thoroughly unserious comedy routine and turns it into a true ideological competitor for whatever you're doing, right? And you're making this more sexy and more attractive to a lot of guys who are like, I'm done with the conservative movement. These people have betrayed me at every time, and I will take whatever is successful at taking them down, even if I don't agree with all of it, even if it doesn't make a lot of sense. I don't care. I just want these people to feel pain for the way that they've kind of treated me and created the world that I now live in. They are culpable for what I am now going through, and they won't take any kind of ownership over it. And so even though Fuentes is like a terrible example for most young men, at least he's talking to young men about things that young men care about. And the right, let's just be really clear, refuses to do that. The conservative establishment would rather die than talk to young men, especially young white men, as if they have legitimate grievances and problems. That's it. Like they'll talk to any other group about this as if they are entirely worthy of that, but they will not talk to this group about this. And so guess who these people are going to? The only guy that will.
Well, and to that point, we've seen over and over and over again, and there are a number of figures I won't name, but I won't say particularly, a number of prominent female conservatives, but many who are not, who adopt this sort of hectoring tone towards young men, talking to them like they're a school principal, and they're upset with them for running through the halls. Like, you need to do better. You need to try harder. How dare you do such a thing? Oh, you think you have legitimate grievances? Well, here's how I had it worse. Here's how really you're the problem. And look, there's a certain degree of tough love that I think many young men, myself included, need. But at the same time, you are pushing these people away, especially when that exact same hectoring, moralistic, to be honest, feminine and irritating tone that they hear from their far left teachers, professors, every movie, everyone, culture broadly saying, it is your fault. You, as a young white man, you are what is to blame. And so naturally, they say, well, these people are united by being on the left. What's the opposite of that? Well, let me check the American conservative movement. And what do they see? They see the exact same thing over and over and over again, right? The exact same attitude of to be honest, hostility and condemnation they see everywhere. And so does that justify bad behavior? Oh, you've been treated poorly, so you no longer have moral agency. No, it does not. But also, if you are interested in preserving an American way of life, you are interested in succeeding in politics, you need young, to be honest, heritage American white men. You need them. They're a core part of who will, your demographic, right? Middle class white people are largely the Republican demographic. There are others as well. But the idea that you can cut yourself off from that, you can look at the real gains that Trump made in 2024, reaching out to young men in particular, and say, yeah, we don't need that. But what we actually need is, a marginal 2% increase in, African American men, which is a smaller percentage that went less heavily for Trump. Or what we really need is to get from 30 to 32% or 35% even of the Jewish vote. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with reaching out to those demographics, far from it. But to say the idea that this is a sustainable, electoral goal, this is what the real adults need to do, is clearly not the case. Again, this is young men are clearly, it's almost tautological. They are the future of America. And the idea that we are going to throw away this gift of, a youth right-wing movement because it violates our kind of, I guess you could say, like limp-wristed, selective social conservative morality is just absurd, especially when, so many of these people who say that's beyond the pale. Why would you ever say that? Why would you ever do something that is, violates these kind of core tenets of, middle-class Christian morality? Will turn around and say, when a prominent influencer and his quote unquote husband are adopting a baby, congratulations. Again, over and over and over again, we see that these values are not consistently applied. It is simply friend or enemy. And they view you, listener, as an enemy. What they want from you is contrition. Give me what I want. But if you're in the club, you can do whatever you want. So, Auron, I'm going to pivot to some super chats. We have a couple. If you have more questions for Auron and I, make sure to send them. Infernal for $2. What is the best band and why is it Linkin Park? I find that deeply morally offensive. I think you're a Nazi. I think that's the reaction to what we find morally offensive. What's your opinion, Auron, on Linkin Park?
I'm not going to be a Linkin Park hater. Lincoln Park is deeply tied to Halo and Mountain Dew. This is just a time in my life. Is it the greatest music of all time? Is it the greatest metal of all time? No, absolutely not. But this is not Nickelback. It's perfectly acceptable, rapish rock from that time period. Perhaps some people would prefer to forget it, but it's inextricably tied to my childhood.
Well, look, Auron, since we were both on the political right and we've had a minor disagreement, I think one of us has to wish the other person would be killed.
Mhm.
So I'll take that mantle. Your take on Lincoln Park is beyond the pale. Check yourself.
Oh no, my beeper's going off. Ah!
Lincoln Park was the real mafia. Mando Spam for $5. The conversation in the OGC Chapter House, episode 15, is enlightening in terms of how uninterested in winning the baseline GOP were. I mean, look, as a citizen of Virginia, can confirm the GOP seems completely and totally uninterested in actually being a real political party.
Well, because they aren't.
Literally. Yeah, exactly.
You and I both have infinite amount of content on why this is the case. So no reason to belabor here, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's like going to like the sketchy Italian restaurant run by the mob, and you're like, why is the spaghetti bad? And it's like, well, it's not a real restaurant. It's for money laundering. Like, you're there for the wrong reason, Wild Speaker for $5. We need our own version of the wall, something that you must make a show of fealty to. What building are we kissing? The Alamo, the Bass Pro Pyramid. The Bass Pro Pyramid's pretty good. I feel like Graceland, that would be a good one. We make people go and kiss the gates at Graceland.
Why is it all in Memphis?
Actually, the pyramid. Yeah, exactly. Do you have any ideas for what the symbol of fealty for the American Empire is, Auron?
No, those are both excellent suggestions. I'll stick with those.
All right, Sean Weiland. Conservatism is just progressivism driving the speed limit. We need reactionaries, not conservatives. Restore the status quo ante for heritage Americans. I mean, I think that first part is ironclad analysis. Conservatism. I mean, we see this, right? They tactically they sort of slink back into liberal, progressive, moral framing the moment they get a little bit scared. Right? It's exactly the same thing. The difference between the two, as you've said, is the speed limit, right? The rate of change, not the fact that things are changing. Mark Greider, $10. Are you saying Mark Levin isn't going to single-handedly wrestle the movement back from Tucker using his nationally syndicated radio show? I might be saying that. All right. I'm not saying that one.
I get that wrong every time on my show too.
I've learned to read before I speak when doing super chats, and so I still have a YouTube channel. These types are completely captured by ideology. They only seek to advance their ideology. I personally am loyal to my people before any ideology. Yes and no. I see your point. I also consider ideology to be subservient to, my interest, my people's interest. Really, not to get off on a rant about ideology. George Bagby has a lot of great work on this, but effectively the 20th century is the century of ideology. The idea of this sort of totalizing system of ideas that explains the whole world, it is sort of past us. We see that, even look at places even like, China or Russia. Like what is Vladimir Putin's ideology? He doesn't really have one. He's just sort of in charge. Similarly, China, it's like, well, it's technically communist, but not really. Even Trump, right, is post-ideological. He changes his mind all the time. Things change in relation to, the situation. I see what you're saying, where conservatives are addicted to ideology, right? They want to have this sort of hard rubric for measuring the world, and it clearly does not exist. But I think that's less true. I think, as we've been saying, that ideology is very much subservient to what they want. Man's reason is subservient to his passions, and I think we see the same thing in the conservative movement.
Well, Russell Kirk, of course, wrote The Conservative Mind, and if you get too far into it, one of the main points he has near the beginning of the book is conservatism should never, ever be ideological. That it is, at its core, true conservative, like actual Burkean conservatism, is the defense of a people and a way of life, not of a economic system or any of these things that we've abstracted out. And I think, Clash of the Civilizations was right, that ultimately after the fall of the Soviet Union, we had these two ideologies that have kind of gripped the entire country, and those things have come apart. And so now we're going back to this place where actually we should be arguing for civilizations and people and traditions and not abstracted social systems. But conservatives are very scared of that because the conservative movement has become hyper ideological, because that was what allowed you to say anyone could be an American. And we don't want to admit that anyone can't be an American, because it turns out that these systems are actually tied to peoples and places, and we should defend those and not the systems. So they're in a very serious problem because, well, they know what the incentives of democracy are, the same as the left does, even if they won't admit it.
You see the same thing with libertarians, which is sort of and we're going to say this word 3 times this episode, but much of libertarianism is sort of a way to, it's sort of a post hoc rationalization or a way to cover your ass for opposing certain features of the welfare state without being called racist, without being called a Nazi, mean names. Mm-hmm. You can basically say, oh, well, I am, ideologically opposed. I have this like rigid, sort of series of mathematical precepts that let me, oppose these certain things. And look, I understand it, especially if you're of a certain, shall we say, neurochemical imbalance that, leads you towards Austrian economics or, study of trains. But the problem is, 1, that's not how the real world works. And 2, that is a very flimsy defense against the left. Clearly, we've seen that they will attack people for anything. They sort of get off on it. They love the opportunity to sort of pull the wings off a bug. And so the idea that being like, oh, well, I don't oppose this because of bad reasons. I do it because I'm a principled Austrian economist. Like, they don't care. It doesn't matter. And look, like, I'm not even trying to say that there's anything wrong with Austrian economics per se, but the idea of a mathematically constructed perfect model for the world is something that needs to be left behind. Paladin YYZ, good to hear from you, man. For $20, very generous. Kirk's murder is still an open case, no proof of guilt yet, but much like if a bank robbery went down in my Western town, I'm giving Jesse James a call, but maybe find out what Bonnie and Clyde were doing that afternoon. Fair enough, right? I think that, there's a difference between a healthy skepticism and the sort of, absurd Q-tard conspiracy theorizing that we often see after a tragedy. I think that's probably the appropriate reading. And then death for $2, based and baster. Sorry, I don't know why my brain did not want to read that word. Well, Auron, thank you so much for appearing on my show. I really enjoyed the chance to speak with you. Where can people find more of you and your work?
Oh, yes, of course. Fantastic talking to you as well. And of course, I'm over at The Blaze and YouTube and Rumble and Twitter and all that stuff. I will actually be having a discussion with my colleague, Jason Whitlock, on much of what we have been discussing here. So he's had, I think, a pretty good track record on addressing these issues. So if anyone wants to hear more of my thoughts on this, we will be doing that later this afternoon on my show.
Yeah, be sure to check that out. Similarly, Auron's book is quite good. It's funny, Auron, and I'm sure you have this experience. I've read your book, and I didn't realize how much I'd stolen from it until I was sort of going back and going over my notes, and I realized I had lifted very large portions of that book and just sort of incorporated it into my thought. That will be linked. Check out Auron's book; it's quite good. As far as my stuff, Jay Burden Show, Apple, Spotify, YouTube. If you want the episodes early and ad-free, you'll have to throw me a few bucks. You can do so on Patreon, Substack, or Gumroad. If you want to support us more directly, of course, you can throw me some crypto. I'd appreciate it. Or head over to our sponsor, Axios Remote Fitness and Coaching, if you want to get jacked. Again, Auron, I appreciate it. And everyone at home, keep your head up. Life can't last forever. Good night.